Hi, it's me, Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and join me at Patreon. Link in the description. The man had great powers. That he knew, which was why he found himself at the address before him. He had been contacted secretly stating that for him to be a superhero, he must look the part, and for a nominal fee, to come to the super lab, they could help. His name was Max. Getting in proved quite easy as they had been expecting him. He was made comfortable and told anything he wanted to know. His questions didn't faze them at all, them being a small group of men and women dressed more for a beauty salon than anything else. All in all, his trepidation had eased quite a bit, so when asked if he was ready to begin his super makeover, he readily agreed. They began by measuring all parts of him, making notes as they went. Being skinny and quite plain, Max never bothered knowing just what his physical statistics were. He didn't want to know. But they told him they needed to know for several reasons, one of which was for comparison. Besides, people with special powers needed to stand out for lots of reasons, one being beautiful people tended to make others feel better. In essence, beauty equaled competence. They gave him a suit of shiny, stretchy material to wear that clung to every part of his body, making him feel very self-conscious. It was a suit that included footwear attached to it, almost like the jammies he had worn as a child. Next, they stood him against a curved wall of sparkles asking if he would please not move as they were making a copy of his form. Just as they were turning on different machines, a man he hadn't seen up to this point walked in. He was dressed in a suit and had a look about him that spoke of sinister intentions. He couldn't hear anybody, superhearing not being one of his powers, but reading lips was something he could handle to a degree. As the machines around him started humming, making his skin and hair tingle, he found he could no longer move. He wasn't worried. He trusted these people. He looked at the man in the suit again. He tried to make out what he was saying. Beautiful. She must be exceptional. I want, anything completely, emerald green. He didn't understand what the conversation was about, but he thought they must be talking about another one of the heroes that had come in. At that point, something started happening. He couldn't move, but he could feel. What he felt was his body starting to change. He sensed more than saw the changes taking place and tried to catalog exactly what was happening and to what degree. He first sensed an increase of tingles in his feet. There was nothing wrong with his feet, they being quite normal, but regardless they started to change. His posture and stance were changing as he felt his heels rising, putting more weight on the balls of his feet. The suit enveloped his entire body with the exception of his head, and he could feel the material under his feet becoming harder, like the soles of shoes. It almost felt as if he was beginning to have heels on. As another minute went by, and his shoes continued changing, causing him to stand almost on tiptoe, he knew the material around his feet had changed into a pair of extremely high heels. This, of course, caused him to stand with his butt and chest sticking out. Then the tingles went up where they began to develop and strengthen his skinny legs. He knew his legs were now manly and strong. He was becoming very excited now, picturing himself the same superhero as in his dreams. But why was he wearing heels? Soon his thighs, hips, and buttocks were a tingle. He felt his thighs swell and hips widen, the material smoothly stretching across his tingly skin. His buttocks enlarged and filled out until he was sure they were too big. In fact, he was positive. They felt huge. He thought they had made a mistake. Conversely, his waist started to shrink down to a size he thought more suited to a child than a man or a superhero. He looked about trying to spy the suit again, only to see him standing in a corner with a huge grin on his face staring right at him. Suddenly, he was afraid. He became distracted when his upper torso began its change. His narrow shoulders filled out some, but did not widen at all. His arms gained some muscle tone and strength as well as his hands. Horrified, he watched as his fingernails lengthened considerably, automatically changing color to a bright and shiny red. His chest started swelling outwards like two balloons, gaining weight and sensitivity as they enlarged. Soon, he had breasts as big, or bigger, than his head, with proportionately enlarged nipples. He didn't know what was going on or why they were turning him into a girl, but he did know he was now a superhero with a super chest. All the while, the man in the suit wore a smile. He felt his face tingling but could not tell what was being changed, although his lips did feel as though they were intensely swollen. His hair grew and grew until it hung past his shoulders in thick, golden curls. Quite a change from the stringy brown he had liked to keep short and combed to the side. Finally, they released him. He staggered about on the ridiculously high heels for only a moment before his innate sense of balance took over. He had changed so much in directions he had not wanted to go that he wasn't convinced he would look like a human anymore. He had only wanted to look like the same person, only better. Why did they change him into a girl? He finally stood in front of a mirror in a room by himself so he could take stock of the changes at his own speed. He was shocked. In the mirror was a creature of greatly exaggerated proportions, an exotic female exuding sex from every pore. Max was speechless, but not thrown. What machines did could be undone. Calmly, he took note of the changes, starting from her feet. Evidently, the suit he was given had been programmed along with him, changing as he did, for on his feet, built into the costume, were a pair of 6-inch heels. His legs were smooth and shapely, not at all like the manly muscles of vision he had had for himself. His hips were wide but very round and sexy, made even more so by the smallness of his childlike waist. Turning sideways, he saw how his butt had greatly been enhanced, both in size and roundness. Overhanging these super developments were the two biggest changes of all. His breasts. He had been correct in their initial size, each being about as big as his head, complete with large nipples, but actually seeing them as another person might well see them was a great shock to him. They were much too large for his frame, even beefed up as it was. His face was possibly the greatest changed. It was heart-shaped with high cheeks and a small straight nose. His lips were very pouty and sensual, made more so with a small chin. The eyes were very large, surrounded by long, black lashes and were the color of emerald green. That's what the suit had said about him. Emerald green, he had said. His hair had been as he had expected it, though a little thicker and bouncier than he at first realized. It being very full and blonde sort of made him look a little vacuous. All in all, his total look was ridiculous and obviously a male fantasy of someone's come to life. This look was anything but modest. When the man in the suit came in without knocking, Max lost his temper almost immediately, despite knowing he was going to get them to give him his own body back, along with a refund. Suit merely stood back smiling, waiting for him to vent while getting an eyeful at the same time. It was then he began to fill him in on the whole thing. It was he who had introduced the model superhero form. The men were all generously muscled and toned, as well endowed, while the women were all very shapely and sexy, equally as well endowed, or more. In addition, each had implanted in their minds his simple plan that would ensure his continued success, and success in other more lucrative avenues, as well as a super supply of sex with the most beautiful of the superheroines. It was all so bizarre. As the suit wrapped up his plans, Max realized they were ignorant of the one power he possessed that could save himself. As he was about to utter the command phrase that would ensure Max's mental slavery, Max hit him with one of the most powerful mental blasts ever. It staggered him, but also commanded him completely, making him his slave. Suit fell to his knees in submission. The one being who, single-handedly, created the superhero form and maintained its acceptance, was now his to do with as he wished. He knew just the punishment for someone like him. Figuring out the equipment was relatively easy. Finding those who were guilty was a little tricky, but because of his mental command power, he was able to separate and release those who were innocent. The rest, suit included, underwent a new form that he created, along with new command routines. As soon as each stepped away from the curved wall, he spoke the command phrase that would seal their punishment. Until a higher power deemed them rehabilitated, that is. Until then, each would work off their crimes as positive contributors of society. Secretaries, operators, typists, meter maids, etc. Suit's crime was too big, however. Knowing the machine could actually change a person's gender, he decided he would allow himself his revenge on the man. He made him into a 60-20-38 redhead. He also utilized the mental command routines and forced him to accept the persona of a stripper named Bambi Shooters. It was his aim to finish with everyone, change his form to something far more suitable and likable, then destroy the machinery. However, it wasn't until he was alone in the lab did he discover the cleverness of the man who had started this whole super makeover thing. His form, and the forms of all the people he had just transformed, were permanent. He was stuck with the body of every man's wet dream. It seemed he had busted his first crime ring. However, saddled with super attributes did little to fully appreciate his victory. Not to mention spending a wad on a whole new wardrobe. After all, going from a medium shirt and size 30 underwear to a super 38GG bra and size 7 panties can be expensive. Life as a superhero is pretty good now. Her form bothered her for a long time, until that is she had been accepted into a superhero group that was all female. It seemed every one of them had been to the super lab. The end. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.